Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Speaks, and I want to do a VR to Catomancy Tarot. They recently did a video called hashtag I got a deck for that, and it was a VR to a different channel. And I literally just looked at it, just started filming it, and already forgot it. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it up for you. But I already did my notes. I got my decks out. It's 16 different prompts. And personally for me, I made one slight alteration to the prompt list. So for number 14, it's a deck that represents your favorite scent. I actually don't have the ability to smell.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
So instead, I'm going to double up on prompt number 9. But with that out of the way, let's go and get started. Deck 1 is a deck representing your favorite movie genre. And I agree with Catomancy Tarot. I feel the same way of I love TV shows more than movies, and I don't really watch TV shows that much. But if I had to say like, ooh, this is the type of stuff that I typically watch the most, it's always some tinge of horror, but it's horror where sometimes I find it kind of funny. There was a movie I watched on my birthday a couple of years ago, and I can't remember the name of it to save me, but it was supposed to be a scary movie. And I remember there's like this one scene where this girl gets possessed, and this little girl is like, "Can you help me?" And the girl's like,
Mom?
Mommy's with the maggots now.
and something about like the delivery of that horror was just so camp. It was so ridiculous and so funny. And even though this is like a zombie, scary, ooh, tarot deck, I actually don't. I find this kind of like light and funny and not really like that horror. I have scary decks in my collection, but like this is one of the very, very few mass market decks that I have. And it's also, it has one of the few lovers cards. Look at that. Granny is not going down without a fight. Like, this is supposed to be scary, and I think this is so funny. She's like, I got my Glock. But anyways, this is one of the few decks I have with a straight lovers card. Found it. I love this lovers card so much. I didn't finish my statement. This is one of the few decks I have with a straight lovers card that is in like my top 10 lovers card. I might make a video of like my top 10 lovers card, but I love this so much, you know? I think that Rider-Waite Smith based, there's a lover's card as a choice, and I definitely think this shows it. But also, this feels like an actual pair of lovers. It actually feels like two people who actually love each other. And it's not like, oh, you know, basic requirements like people do with like the Wheel of Fortune. You know, here's a wheel, lover's card, here's a man, here's a woman, done, you know? Like, this is very soft and gentle and also horrific. And there's that, you know, they're both willing to help the other one or help themselves or make a choice on, do they remain human, do they remain zombie? And honestly, I think it'd be more romantic if they were zombies together. I just love this. Brains. I remember feeling like this. Okay. So that was my favorite movie genre. Also, I've pulled this deck out, I think like 4 Halloweens in a row. This is my Halloween deck. And then I don't read with it at all. For prompt 2, it is my favorite movie. And even though I don't watch a lot of favorite movies, I do have a couple favorites. And it was hard to narrow it down to just one. And I still don't think like I just think this is where my deck collection and the movies I like coincide, because I know that there's a lot of decks being made that are about like TV shows and movies, like people making their own like Skyrim tarot deck or their own Game of Thrones tarot deck. And I feel like a lot of those decks, they get close to hitting the target, but they don't hit the target for me. So for this one, it was just like, what decks do I have that comes close to hitting that target as much as possible? And for my favorite movie, I picked the Blood Moon Tarot. And this is to represent my little note I made for myself. This is to represent the movie Dark Crystal. I remember it's like Dark Crystal is like one of those movies if you saw it growing up, it kind of just like stuck in the back of your mind and it stayed there forever, forever and ever. And it kind of just like shows up every now and then. And you're like, oh, what was that movie about? And then you rewatch it and it's just as good. And then you forget about it and you watch a couple years later and you're like, what's that movie about? And you rewatch it and it's really good. And it's like, there's all these small details that you're like, oh, this movie's really good. And I could have chose Coraline. I'm trying to think what other movies I could have chosen. Again, I don't really watch movies. If it wasn't Coraline, and it wasn't Matilda, and it wasn't Dark Crystal, what are my movies? I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of movies I like watching. Oh, I love this look. So fierce. Love it. Oh, I should probably give a nudity warning. If you're watching my channel, expect that there might be some nudity. Another great Lovers card. I love specifically, like, I think one of my number one favorite things that this artist does is their shading. I love their shading so much, the way they apply color. Like, look at that yellow. Yellow is such a hard color to shade, and they just do it so well, and I appreciate it. And I also really love the specifically like ornate borders on every card. I know some people hate it. Also, this creator is working on an Oracle deck too, so put me in that pre-order list. So that was deck number 2 for a favorite movie. For your consideration, Blood Moon Tarot for Dark Crystal. And for my favorite color for prompt number 3, I pulled etc. this deck, which you may know. I believe it's Tarot of the Holy Spectrum. And my favorite color, we talked about this in the bartender tag, and I'm going to say it again here. I love black, right? But I love black juxtaposed with lots of color. I want pastels and neons and saturated colors and black. Like, I want everything all at once, right? I love the boldness of it. I love that, the application of fire. And I think something about this deck, let me actually grab another one. There's another deck that I'm thinking of. Grabbed it. So this deck and this is like a gay NSFW tarot deck. They both have something vaguely like 90s-esque about the illustration in a way of like 90s animation. Actually, I think I have another resource right here. So this game I played growing up, and there's just something about the way that it's drawn that's giving like 90s, early 2000 illustrations and animation styles. Look at that beautiful shades. And I think the color story with the illustration style is so beautiful. I don't really like this card though. I'm like, it's giving me the Joker. Not the Joker, sorry. The Riddler. It's giving me the Riddler. And I honestly just think that the Riddler is just a lame-ass villain. You know? Like, what gets wet as it dries? A towel. But I love, back to this, the color story. I kind of wish, if I can be honest, that I get they're using color to be like, oh, these are these colors, so it's obviously that suit. And I wish they had branched off of that and just let them really just go wild. This one, ooh, this is a good example. I'm about like a short image on the screen, if I remember, which I will. But this card in particular, it reminds me of this game, Dark Gauntlet Legacy, which was for the PlayStation 2. So this is a perfect example of like that aged aesthetic. And it was an old arcade game that got moved over to PlayStation 2 that I also played growing up. That's my favorite color. And a little history note on 90s animation. The next deck is a deck that represents my childhood self. Now, growing up, I had the Game Boy Color Advance. Sorry, the Game Boy Color. The Game Boy Advance color with like the little square, like that little game. I had the DS, and something that stayed continuous was my love for Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, and Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2. Of those, my favorite was Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2. And I loved the wild world. I loved the immersive story. I loved the jobs and classes, and the different races you could play. And I don't have a Final Fantasy tarot deck that's Final Fantasy Tarot Deck Advance, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2. I don't have a Final Fantasy Tarot deck in like that sort of style. So the closest thing I could do to represent what I did growing up and what I played and what I enjoyed was the Tarot. So I think the Tarot has like a different typical structure than the Rider-Waite Smith. Love this illustrations. It's so soft. But look at that. It's a little rat and it's on a quest. And like it looks like they just leveled up and they just learned Shield Bearer, so they can keep that as a passive trait. You're fleeing from a battle. This is kind of like Skyrim-esque about being over cucumbered. I never know how to say that word. And look, this rat got a little confused and it tried to be a Moogle and be a Chocobo Knight, and it accidentally rode a pigeon. Now this, in my mind, Black Mages and Final Fantasy, they did stuff like this. I mean, they really didn't, but I feel like this is just perfectly represents like small, minuscule fantasy. I think, let's see, I was playing Final Fantasy Tactics Advance the same time I was playing Final Fantasy Crisis Core. I was like, this is like a good bridge between like growing up and playing Super Mario World, and I forgot which exact Mario, but I'm gonna put it on the screen because I was the first one to beat it in my family, and I remember that. But there's a difference, and like this is a branch between that world of the Super Mario and then the more like adult games. Like look at that little evil devil rat. Don't like for the wheel. Don't really care for the wheel. It could have been like a rat running on a treadmill, like a hamster wheel. Something else I like, I don't know if you can tell, I think you could tell most in here. The application the artist did of watercolor paint on paper with the specific type of paper they use, you can still see the paper texture, which I really enjoy. And I really don't like linen finished cards, but I feel like this deck might be one of the few that would actually benefit from having two versions, one where it's a linen finish and one where there isn't, just because I feel like the linen texture would might aid in that sensation of like you're holding the original artwork. So that was a deck for your childhood self. And the next one is a deck that represents your teenage self. So a lot of people talk about your inner child work. And I don't do that often. I do a lot of inner teenage work, and I love that so much. And for me, someone who represents, don't dull your teeth, sharpen your teeth, have that bite in your arguments, be bold, be brave, remember the lessons that none of this matters. A deck that like represents for me that very well is this, which is the Azathoth Tarot. This deck is so just like metal, This is a Thoth based tarot deck. Again, nudity warning. But I don't think this is the intention. This is so queer, this card right here. It's just, this deck is like overflowing in details and shading. It has its visual language and its tone down pat. I think if you are a Thoth reader who's into horror, like this might be the deck for you. Unfortunately, I have more practice in Rider-Waite-Smith and Marseille than I do Thoth, but I keep this deck because I love it so much. And oh, look at that Eldritch Monstrosity. I think there's something about like my collection that in hindsight I'm like, oh, this is giving horror, but it's also giving like colorful and fun, And my teenage self, I remember witnessing a lot of things in the news that was definitely horrific. And I feel like teenager to teenager, people talk about teenagers who are so angsty and cringy. And I feel like I'm trying to paraphrase this. I love the teenagers of today as an extension of when I was a teenager. Because the teenagers today, if you thought they were angry before, these ones are angry, you know? And there's so many good reasons why teenagers today are angry. And why, if you're like, why don't kids behave anymore? Like, first off, that they always say that. There's that kids these days argument, and then why are everyone so mean nowadays? Those are arguments that have been existing for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. There's just some divide that makes you like think that people younger are just becoming ruder and meaner. But back to before, there's so many good reasons why teenagers are angry now, like angrier than we've seen in the past, and like an actual viable way that we can like understand and see. Like, I'm thinking about like Greta Thunberg. I probably missaid their name, but I'm not a scientist. And I feel like that anger as a teenager and me as a teenager, like this deck just melds together. Look at that. Love this. The symbol on the back, the sigil, is something that you see multiple times in the artwork. Also, as well as like the artist's signature. I will also say that, like, just like a teenager, you can't stay a teenager for long. And I actually can't use this deck for long. Every time I pull it out, but afterwards I get a headache. Oh. That is a tarot deck representing my inner teenage self, my angry, angsty teenage self. Actually, I'm bringing it back. And if this was my childhood self and my teenage self, my adult self, I feel like is like a meld between the two. And that's the Queer Revolution Tarot. So we went from bright and happy to angry to finding happiness again. And I love this deck in the way that it tries to show queer people as they are. And it doesn't use queerness as soft feminine, you know? There's like so many different times where I see people who are queer who get their queerness discredited or invalidated as like, oh, you mean like you're just like not feminine, you're like softly feminine. And it's like, no, you know, non-binary and queer does not mean soft feminine. You can be non-binary and be like 130-pound AFAB person, but you could also weigh 260 to 300 to more pounds and be AMAB with a full beard and be non-binary too. Your queerness isn't based on like how passable you are or how presentable you are to the patriarchy or even how white and thin you are. It's based on you and your connection to yourself. I got my hair cut by someone who kind of looks like that. I need to get my hair cut again. Tom Benjamin messaged me on Instagram because I posted that I was thinking about dyeing my hair, my eyebrows, and he's like, do it. And I was like, okay, fine. And honestly, I'm thinking about fully just Cruella de Vil, dyeing my hair and my eyebrows like half black, half white. But I know the white's going to take a couple sessions. I feel like as an adult, this exemplifies there's still pain and there's still trauma, and there's still anger in the world. But as an adult, I think something I really try to do is I try to see people for people and see them for who they actually are, and take all my judgment and put it somewhere else so that I can truly hear people as they are. And I think that that's something that this specific deck does very well. It sees people as they are. So that was number 6 for a deck that represents your adult self. Now it's number 7, a favorite song or movie genre. I think, hands down, as of right now, correct me if I change my mind years later, my favorite artist is Melanie Martinez. And one of my favorite songs that she has ever made, my favorite song, it has to be Test Me. So Test Me is about Melanie talking, quote unquote, to their ancestors. And they're saying, I want to be the best that I can be. And I want to be tested, and I want to be pushed down, and I want to be led and guided by people, ancestors who've earned their place, you know? So I have to get as much rest as possible, but I also have to create as much as possible and do as much as I can before I die, you know? And I have to earn my place with the best of my ancestors while I'm alive by doing as much as possible. And there's so much more to it, but I love that song so much. And it epitomizes so much of like my ideas of art, you know? Make bad art, but make it now, you know? Make self-indulgent art. And this deck I bought off Kickstarter when I was still using it, before they started to I stopped using Kickstarter for some reasons, and I can make a video on that. But this is a Melanie Martinez tarot deck that a fan had made. And what better to represent Melanie Martinez than an actual Melanie Martinez deck? And this is the artist who made it. This is based mostly on her Crybaby album. I believe that she went to make more, and then she got like a cease and desist or something. Not that Melanie Martinez is actually working on a tarot deck, mind you, otherwise people would buy it. But I think as a favorite song or a movie genre, deep, meaningful, intentional is like my favorite genre. And this was obviously this was a love letter to Melanie Martinez from the creator. And you know, a deeply intentional love letter to a deeply intentional, conceptual artist in her own way. I hate this lover's card. I don't hate it. I'm just like, I would have wanted to see like that one. I love that one. I would have wanted to see more. The blue boy. I like that double card. This one right here. Love that double card. There it is. But as a favorite song or movie genre, I picked this Crybaby Tarot. And this is actually the original bag it came in. Okay, let's see. Prompt number 8, my favorite book genre. I have been trying to get back into reading and audiobooks. And what I'm needing right now, and what I've been able to find that I could read start to finish outside of audiobooks, was books that were explaining things, books that were kind of educational. So my audiobook list is currently YA and educational, both at the same time. And I think what better to show off both than the Twildwick Tarot, 2nd edition. A lot of people say they wanted this deck for path working. Yep. Holding it upside down. Oh. You didn't see that. You didn't see that at all. But to me, this gives like young prince, childhood prince, and you are walking around your like place of living that maybe you have to stay at that you don't want to. And that gets like the YA. And everything has like a history to it. Everything has an education to it, or like maybe a poshness to it. And that's what I really love. This history and education and refinement is also kind of grunged up as the artwork. I'm looking currently for a project for books on ecology and the ecosystem. Specifically, I'm going to do some research into endangered animals and see if there's endangered and extinct and vulnerable animals, and then I'm going to do some research into the same but for plants if I can find it. A lot of people suggest braiding sweetgrass, and I think I listened to like a chapter or two, and I was like, I don't think I'm ready for this. Like, I almost need like textbook read out loud to me. I'm gonna go back to sweetgrass. Don't worry. Go ahead and write your rude comment down below about how I'm a terrible person, but I promise I will get back to sweetgrass. But as like a book genre, I just, the young hero creates their own adventure, and it kind of gives like maybe a more fantasy version of Coraline, exploring Coraline's home. So that was my favorite book genre. Now, if you had remembered, I said that because I don't have a sense of smell, I'll be doing 2 decks for this one, which is favorite TV shows past and present. So I have a couple of TV shows I really like. I like Warehouse 13. I love Heroes. Lost Girl. Love Lost Girl. But I could only pick 2 decks to represent it. And I want to talk more about Warehouse 13 on another time. So I chose, for my first deck for a TV show, the High Tarot. And I feel like this black and white deck, 10 out of 10. You are now entering into a world of the Twilight Zone. Love the Twilight Zone growing up. there's something with the shading and the mood that this artist has done that it gives sort of a vintage-esque feel to their own artwork. And I love that, and I appreciate that. And also, this is a bit of a cop-out because everything is an artifact. Kind of like Warehouse 13. But even in like the Twilight Zone, I could see something like these props being the main storyteller and protagonist, you know? Like, I think I passed it already. There's like the Mask card. And that reminds me of that one Twilight Zone episode where the guy died and he's like, oh God, my family sucks. So if they want my wealth, they have to wear this mask all night. And for some reason, like get over it. They were like freaking out. They're like, no, not the mask. And then they wear it. And then at the end of the night, they take it off. And they're, I'm gonna say spoiler alert, but like this show's been out for 60 years. Maybe, I don't know, I can't count. But their faces are disfigured to the shape of the mask, and I love that. I feel like this as a deck love that. I don't know if this creator has made more decks. I know he was working on a collage tarot, and I don't know if he ever continued working on that because I love his art. Here it is, the mask. I love his art, and I wish that A, I had more money too, so that B, I could buy all of his artwork. But back to the horror, there's something about the Twilight Zone that I could talk about for hours on the meaning of the Twilight Zone and the ways that it hits the story on the head. But that's not the point of this video. The point is me saying I love the Twilight Zone, and I use the Hyde Tarot to represent it. And the next deck that I use to represent a favorite TV show on the complete opposite spectrum is this. So I love. I love systems in other universes where your personality and who you are as a person fully changes and dictates how the system or the overarching theme of the show works, right? So I do not like, outside of one video game, I don't like Star Wars. But what I do like is Hunter x Hunter. Because with Star Wars, it's like, oh, there is some semblance of who you are as a person, and your values can dictate if you are a Jedi, a Sith, or like a gray Jedi, which there's only been like 3 or 4. But in Hunter x Hunter, this is the original back from the Kickstarter, by the way. But in Hunter x Hunter, there is this, for lack of better words, if you haven't seen the show, like energy work that the characters can do. And it is entirely, from my perspective, based on who you are as a person in a form that cannot change. But this is the artwork. And love that. The art style, I love it so much. I wish that the artist had made a full 78 card tarot deck. I love her so much. But I love the small, subtle cues and hints to the TV show and the story itself, because this deck does have some characters that are not in the TV show, not in the anime. Me. I also, for example, I also love I love the Twilight Zone, and I love Hunter x Hunter. Enough to the degree that I have used like Hunter x Hunter in like Pop Pantheon Magic, you know? And this Lovers card, if you know the story of Hunter x Hunter and you know who these two people are, ultimate enemies to lovers, completely, you know? Goes from like, I want you dead, you are less than, to I will literally die for you. I think I tried to see if the creator has ever made more, and they haven't. Here, this is this card. Miriam and Kamugi. The Soulmates is a card that encourages you to follow your heart. In traditional tarot, this card is called the Lovers, but I changed it because I believe it applies to more than romantic relationships and many circumstances. The appearance of the soulmates in a reading implies that. Implies that you need to figure out what's important to you in order to make the right choice, despite what other forces in your life pressures you to do. Another interpretation is the unity of opposing forces into something harmonious. I chose I'm sorry, I have a speech impediment. Miriam and Kamugi for obvious reasons, but also because of Miriam's internal struggle that was brought on after he met Kamugi, which I'm pretty sure I just said her name wrong multiple times. The story is so sad and so beautiful, and I understand not just the artists of this deck, but like the artist of Hunter x Hunter is a bit incapable of finishing the story, and I understand that, but I just wish there was more. So I love this deck. I think like less than 100 were made, and I have one, and I'm like, score. Let's see. For the next one, it is your favorite pastime or hobby. And I love making art. I love making mixed media art that is eco-friendly. So why not show off the deck that has inspired it all? This is the Art Witch Oracle deck made by Miss Molly Roberts. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And this is a handmade pouch, and I'm pretty sure a handmade book, and mixed media art pieces. And if you have been on YouTube for a minute, you know, and you're into witchcraft stuff like grimoires, you have probably seen her grimoire video, Rock Your Grimoire. And I think that's where it all started. I love mixed media art. I love making art. I love painting and drawing. I love not being good at things. You know, what's that saying? Like, you gotta suck at something before you're kind of good at something. The first step of being kind of good is kind of sucking at it. And these are all illustrations that Molly Roberts has made. And I know a lot of people have been asking her to make a tarot deck. I know she has another deck. Let's see, I should have it within reach. So she has another deck that is inspirational creativity cards. So I'm just going to pull a random card. So it gives you like a creative prompt to work on something. Ooh. I know people have been asking her to make a tarot deck, but I don't believe that she is, from my understanding, connected to the story of tarot or tarot cards as a whole. So I'm not going to pressure her to do it. But if she ever made a tarot deck, obviously, you know, I would buy it. Where's this moon card? Here you go. So you get a duality of the different expansions of her art and how inspirational it is from the point of view. So this is my deck for favorite past summer hobby, making art and talking smack. Let's see, what's the next prompt? Favorite holiday or dream holiday destination. So I have never been on a vacation before. That's right, I've never been on a vacation. I saw someone say once that was like, the three classes in America are never been to Disneyland, has been to Disneyland once or twice, or goes to Disneyland every year. And I've never been to Disneyland, and I don't want to go to Disneyland. So for me, my favorite idea or dream holiday is the Architect's Tarot. I love, and I personally feel comfortable in liminality and spaces of in between. And people I had seen online, they were talking about getting the Tilde Barrow for like stepping into the card. I said it earlier and I forgot the term for it. But this deck, for me, it's so liminal. And this would be where I would want to go. Like, I don't see these as actual people. I would want to go to these landscapes and experience the lack of people. If I were to go to like on a favorite holiday destination, you know, like let's say I want to see the Eiffel Tower, right? I want to go there and not be surrounded by people and not be like pushed and shoved. I want to enjoy it at my own pace. If I wanted to see Stonehenge, right, I want to be able to walk up to Stonehenge and get close to the rocks. And I know that, you know, you can't do that. And a bit of that is because of people and how they used to. I heard stories about people who are like, oh, I want a souvenir. So they would like chip a bit of it away. And I'm like, bruh, if everyone does that, there isn't going to be a Stonehenge anymore. So my ideal dream holiday destination would probably be to just explore locations, like places of great beauty, and kind of just be in the absence. You know, be in the absence of people, the absence of noise. I might take a camera, I might not, and just kind of I want to see the stars without all the light pollution that I live by. I want to be able to step out and see the beauty and the wonders of the world to their full extent. That's what I think this deck is great at. Hopefully that made sense. Like, obviously, you know, tourism like economies, quote unquote, have to exist. But that doesn't mean that, like, at any point we can't go, is this really the best choice? So prompt number 12 is a deck that represents a decade from when you were born. And when I think about the decade I was born, which was in the 90s, I think about grunge, you know? I think about grunge, I think about rock and roll, I think about, honestly, really, really bad graphic design. Not like, in the way that everything was, like, handwritten. Like the handwritten font that you would see in like an X-Files where it's distressed, or, you know, like X-Files, I'm pretty sure the font is like typed, but it's still distressed. But more of like, I would just say our capabilities in making digital art then is not as extensive as it is now. And going back to talk about like TV shows and animes, and a cartoon or an anime that is animated digitally will only ever look as good as the software running it. However, a good drawing is a good drawing forever. So for a decade that represents the 90s, I wanted something that showed the artwork of the 90s that artistically looked like the 90s. And I chose the Cosmic Tarot. So I've been on a quest to collect every deck, every gay deck with like a gay lovers, and this was one of those decks. Nudity warning, just like every other deck, you know. And it's the gay lovers card. It's so 90s, you know? It's so aggressively 90s. There are definitely elements that I do not enjoy, but there's elements that I do enjoy. I enjoy the nudity from the point of view of like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but like, you're going to be nude at least once in your life. I enjoy the surrealistic application of collage. I definitely think that there may be some aspects that has some implied maybe appropriation to it that I don't enjoy. Look at this. This is so 90s. So 90s. If we're thinking about like a TV show, I don't know if this show was in the 90s. I'm gonna correct myself on the screen if it was, but I think about like Cyber Chase. This is Cyber Chase. Cyber Chase is moving. We're beating Hacker at his game. Oh, look at that. This is giving beautiful headache. Like, oh, I have a headache, but I have to serve and strut. It's so important that I serve and strut first. And I think if I ever had to go and say, oh, what's a deck that represents the 90s? I'd say this one. Let's see. Yep, 1998. So the year that I was born. if I can get a little TMI with you. That's what I meant by like appropriation. Is it? It's kind of far away. This is almost like offensively 90s, you know? Like, I would expect to find some sort of company that sold cigarette paper with like this as a main logo. But that is my deck to represent the year I was born in the 90s. And now, a deck to represent my favorite flower. So I would like to apologize. I'm sorry. Just like with colors, I don't have a favorite flower. So I decided if I have to show off plants, I'm going to do this one. The Goblins and Gardens Tarot deck. I think if you were like pulling my leg, gun to my head, and you're like, you have to pick a favorite flower, I might say like a clover, like the white and pink clover flowers. But I really just like all floral. You know, fauna and flora are my lovers. And I may or may not belong in the Addams family. It's kind of like those. Ooh, I love that. Those old Dungeons and Dragons manuals. But that's my understanding. This deck was collaged from Dungeons and Dragons and gardening and floral books. Also, this reminds me, I love the story of the wife of one of the creators of Dungeons and Dragons. So apparently she had thought that he was cheating on her. This was like back in the day. And she was like working herself up, like, I can't believe he would do this to me. I can't believe he would cheat on me. He should be grateful. Like, I'm gonna get it. You know what? I'm gonna catch him in the act. That's right. I'm gonna catch him in the act. So one day, he leaves, and she follows him, and he goes into a room and like closes the door. She waits a little bit. She slams open the door. It's like, I got you. I caught you. And he's just sitting there with a bunch of guys rolling dice. And she goes like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I made a game. Oh, succulent. Beautiful succulent. People say succulents are easy to grow, and they are liars, and their pants are on fire, and they're terrible, terrible people. Love that. Love that. Love that pink. I think, honestly, the way that this creator... I think you can tell, I personally believe that it's free. Like, it costs $0 and 0 cents to be rude and be mean. But it's also free to be nice. So, you know, I love extending compliments when I can. I love the way that this specific creator uses color and the overlapping of the color and the way that they chose their color stories and even like the positioning of the artwork. I really appreciate that. Like the hues of color they use is almost delicate, and I love that. So skipping 14, number 15 a deck to represent your favorite food. And dare I say, I am a professional big back. I love food. I love savory food. I love soups. Honestly, I love everything. I just love savory food. I'm not much of a sweet tooth. And the one deck I had that I felt like it hits it right on the head, even though I don't think you can eat most of it. It's the Mushroom Tarot. This deck is, in my own personal opinion, like Dr. Seuss-esque. I love mushrooms. I can't think of a singular mushroom dish that is sweet. I could be wrong. If so, go ahead and dox me. Not really. But I love kind of like the softness, the gentleness. I expect this to be like in a children's story. This doesn't even look like a sad, tragic card, and yet it's supposed to be one. I don't want to hear about I don't want any huggy, cuddly, softy, fluffy decks. Well, sometimes we need those fluffy decks, and sometimes we need a deck to tell us hey, you really need some yummy, delicious mushrooms for your hot pot. I don't think, going back to what I was originally saying, I don't think I've ever seen a mushroom dish that I didn't like. I think one of my goals is I want to try vegetarian fried chicken, which is just mushrooms that are fried. I want to try that out. And I think, personally, in my own opinion, I think elided guidebooks are where the artist slacks. And as a result, people don't really like the guidebooks. So I don't really care for the guidebook. But in this case, I love Chris Adams and the way that he gives you 3 mood-setting archetype cards that you can use for divination, and then an explanation over each of the cards. And even the minor arcana, he separates the mushroom to a specific type of mushroom. And I think mushrooms have definitely gotten a cultural resurgence in pop culture. And I definitely think there's something to that about the aesthetics of mushrooms. But I also think the symbology of mushrooms, as a collectiveness of reaching together, I feel like that could be some sort of cultural subtext about wanting community, which I do know that a lot of people struggle with feeling lonely. I love the guidebook. And our last prompt. Ooh, that was a long one, wasn't it? A deck that represents my favorite beverage. And again, I'm sorry. Please don't burn me at the stake. I do not have a favorite beverage. I have a favorite genre of beverages, which is adult beverages. I love me a cold brew with white mocha and caramel and cream blended. I love me a glass of wine, And I chose the Leblanco Tarot for that. For that wine and coffee. I guess you could give some children maybe coffee, but I wouldn't. Don't get me wrong, I like tea, but I also like coffee. And I don't even like coffee because it's ooh, I gotta get up, I gotta get ready, I gotta do this and this. I just like coffee, I like the taste, what I can have and the flavor of it. And something about this deck, I think that there are definitely like queer decks that are childhood appropriate, and there's also like queer artwork that isn't, because queerness is a genre and an identity of art, but it's not the art itself. So when people talk about like, should children be exposed to like XYZ queer thing, it's kind of like, well, should children be exposed to movies? Should children watch horror? Should children watch comedies? Like, yeah, I definitely think there's definitely some comedies that are child appropriate. There's also some movies that aren't child appropriate. And there's some books that are child appropriate, and there's some books that aren't, you know? And I think that this queer deck is serve, strut. Rent was due that day. I think this deck is just something that you need to have a taste of nuance to fully appreciate. Also, like, this is one of the decks I keep 100%. I don't mind using it for readings, but I mostly keep this for posterity, because when I was just getting into tarot, this was, I think this was one of them too. One of the few cards that I was just seeing, like, oh, I'm getting into tarot, and they're like, I'm a creator. This is another one right here of, I'm getting into tarot and I'm making my own tarot deck. And I was like, oh, sign me up. I want your deck. This is a fully illustrated 78 card tarot deck exploring the surreal, intense, queer, and divine. If I have to do an honorable mention, it would be the Archetypes deck. I just had that nearby. But thank you so much, Catomancy Tarot, for making your video. I know that you were speaking in your video about feeling grim, and honestly, I feel that, and I get that, and I hope that a lot of people could take a deep breath while watching this. Thank you. Insert name, since apparently I don't have any memory of the person who created this tag. I will definitely be putting your name on the screen. Thank you for watching, you know, and don't be afraid to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell for more tarot videos. I make one tarot video so far a month. That's my plan. One tarot video a month, one grimoire and art video a month, and then one personal video a month. That's my goal. 3 videos a month. I might do more. I might not. Who knows? But thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day, guys. Bye for now.